Hello, welcome to Matters of DeCorum. I'm Scott Cora. This is what matters to me. Two notes up front. One, sound might not be perfect. While I've got my very good voice filter active, I've also got a fan running at full blast because it's hot and I will melt if I don't. Two, crazy old man here, got to do something about that. Okay. So I'm sitting down a couple of weeks ago, relaxing as I am wont to do, recuperating from one thing or another and trying not to move too much. A friend of mine messages me, do you have the bandwidth for another campaign? And I usually do. I'm addicted to role-playing games. That's not hard to tell from my channel and anyone who's known me for 5 minutes. And I will generally run one at a drop of a hat. I'm a little low energy right now, so it's got to be something that grabs me. And like, well, what did you have in mind? And they let me know that they had some friends who haven't had the best experiences with role play, particularly Dungeons and Dragons, and they were wondering if I'd run something for them. There's zero chance I'm going to say no to that. There's absolutely none. I can be as swamped as anyone ever has been, and I will make the time and find the energy to run that game. I love this hobby. I love this hobby enough to have made it my career, and to have someone who has not had a good experience with it, in need of a better experience. You ask me to do that for you, I'm gonna give you an experience. I will take my time and my energy, and I will run that game. That is a pleasure and one of the joys of my life. So I don't use published adventures. I don't. I understand why people do. I have no problem with people who run published adventures. I'm playing in a couple of published adventures. There is nothing wrong with that. I don't use them. I don't like the rails that they, by necessity, have to put players on. It's published adventures have boundaries. There are places outside of those pages. A very good game master can just ignore those boundaries, but the adventure is going to be written in such a way that you're probably going to have to stick with them to some degree to actually get your use out of that book. I've put years into my improvisational gaming skills. So the downside to that being, okay, now we are starting a campaign. It is a D&D campaign. You are at ground zero. You have nothing on the table, and you've got a session zero, if you're lucky enough to have a session zero, to put it together. I like to base campaigns around the characters in them these days. It is very easy for me to come up with a giant continent-spanning civilization with intrigue and history and have a villain in the background who has these plans that whatever characters come along are going to stumble into it, and they might have their different ways through it, but they're all going to hit the exact same thing. There's going to have these things that need to get done, and that's fine, but let's talk about doing it from the other side. You start with people's character concept. From simple to complex, folks have a full, complete backstory thought out, or they hadn't gotten that far and they kind of have a feeling for a class or maybe a race. They're not fully formed yet. They're trying to get that. And being in on that level of the character development is amazing, because as that character is built conceptually in front of you, there are elements flowing into it. There are things the world needs to have in order for that character to exist that way. the complete backstory. Oh, okay, so I'm going to need to have some of this, and that's going to have to be a factor. And this is the attitudes of people in that area, and let's start filling in the blanks. Let's start building the structure on the table. Well, I'd like the character to have the ability to do this. Okay, that implies this exists in the world. Uh, you have a history of gaming in your head. And oh, well, I'd like to have a character that has these features. That's like something I did in a campaign. I didn't use much of it in that campaign. That was kind of a toss away. But I still have it built, so I'm going to put it back in. And now I can actually fully explore that. Oh, that stuff that we really enjoyed from the other campaign. Could we know those people? You can absolutely know those people. Here, that goes over here in this campaign world. Bit by bit, your characters made by those players form a cohesive ball of dough, as it were. Um, Usually, sometimes they're just not going to fit together perfectly. Sometimes they fit together way better than you thought they ever would. If you are gaming with people who get along fairly well, and you can see that give and take in character creation, you get something that is fairly special, actually. So you build this campaign not around what you want the villain to be able to do, but around what the characters can do. Not just when they are made, but what they will eventually possibly be able to do. Many paths, lots of different choices that they can make, lots of different potentials, and your campaign grows with the characters, particularly if you're being improvisational about it. Oh, that next thing they have to face, that's just about what you can handle, maybe a little bit harder. What do you think? You want to give it a try? Manage to set that bar just a little bit higher than the characters think they can reach, and then watch as those brilliant, chaotic, nightmarish influences on the game world, players, um, do what they do and exceed your expectations. You celebrate their successes and you help them learn from their failures. And sometimes you turn their failures into story elements. That's something that's going to follow you. That's a wound that is going to uh, mark you as having been in this kind of a fight. That is a relationship that is broken that's going to come back as a nemesis at some point in time. That is failed diplomacy, and now this land is falling into a war. But don't worry, not too many people blame you for it. Building a campaign around your PCs, those player characters that are built up. They might be rehashes of a character they've had in a previous campaign, which means that's beautiful because then they are bringing a rich history and a whole neighborhood with them. Oh, here's the city that they came from and the people that they dealt with and the nemesis and villains that they had back there. Or maybe they're making that character from whole cloth, and as they build that character, the character doesn't exist in a vacuum. They're not made in a empty chamber with nothing else around them. Characters, whether they are social or antisocial, whether they've got families or they're orphaned, no matter what, there are people and institutions and locations around them as they come to exist as characters. Their parents, their acquaintances, their teachers, their instructors, their enemies, their bullies, uh, old friends, old enemies. You can put as much extra flavor into your world as people bring with them or people choose to deal with. I love this process because here's the trick for the dungeon master. You have to put them there. You have to guide people into walking into this land with enough detail that they can imagine themselves there. Not just that, so that every player is imagining themselves in the same place. There are going to be differences. If you ask 3 artists who have been involved in the D&D game to draw a character or a location or a monster, you're going to get 3 different appearances because they're filling in a lot of those details on their own. But if they all have the same basic story, they're all in the same location. You are creating an imaginary space that everyone can share. It's the closest thing to telepathy you're going to find. But this world is probably not fully fleshed out in your head and shouldn't be. Computer games do this thing, especially if they're big, expansive open world games. Most of that world doesn't exist if you're not in it. Oh, the computer's keeping track. There are numeric values to the things that are happening over there. Those might change or alter, but it's not rendered into place until your character goes there, until the eyes of the character would have a chance to see those things. Until then, they don't technically exist. It's a great way to save memory. It helps computer in performance, and it saves the resources of the computer so it can put more detail into what you've got in that specific location while keeping just the barest track of what is happening every place else in that game world. And that's not a bad trick for the dungeon master to pick up. Having a good idea of what is happening in the world. Well, here is world plot. Here is the overall campaign. I know what's happening. I've probably written it down someplace. Okay, I probably haven't written it down someplace because I'm bad at writing things down. I should have written it down someplace, but I'm keeping track poorly. It's going to change, so I don't keep track too closely. But where the characters are at, we're adding things, details. This is how this secret society operates. This is how this character reacts to you. And that character is building in your head. Just like the player characters were constructed from whole cloth as you put this together, the NPCs are getting a life of their own. I ran the first session of this campaign I was asked to run yesterday. Really, really enjoyed it, but I was scrambling to come up with my inspiration, my characters, what I'm going to put in this place. Reaching into my bag and pulling out carbon copies of characters I've had in the past and giving them names. We're doing the game on Discord in a voice channel, but as I am coming up with the names of NPCs and places, I'm typing them in the chat, in the general channel, which is the closest thing to note-taking I have done in a game in a long time, but it's helping me a lot. I recommend it. It lets me actually keep track. I had everyone type the name of their characters in, too, and they added them as nicknames on the server. And that helps. But yeah, keeping track of your NPCs super important because you might think an NPC is a throwaway. Well, you're going to walk past this person and they're never going to appear again. You don't need to give them a name. You barely need to give them a description. They're just there to set the tone for the world. And that's the character that your player characters are going to latch onto. They're going to want to find that person a home or give them some help or what are your problems? You want to come and live with us? You can carry our stuff. And now they're part of the campaign. And yeah, you want to remember that person's name. Um, and as this all builds in your head, you're localized. This is the scene. This is the present. I'm here. I can't think about what's happening in the next episode. I can start seeing the building blocks of stuff happening, but you're in the present. You're in that moment, filling in the sights and the sounds and the smells, what the everything feels like. Those characters have senses you might not be familiar with. Oh, my character has blind sight, so I know what is around me, whether I can see it or not. How do you describe the impressions from that? Uh, I can sense magical energies. I know what airflow is like around me. The game master, is all of that information. Everything and everyone around the character. That's a lot of resources. It takes a lot. I barely have the clock speed to do this some days. But when you have done it properly, you've given them just enough sensory information that everyone thinks they're in the same place. Everyone can imagine they're in the same place. And when you have built your campaign around the characters, what they're sensing, what they're doing, and focusing down on that, that's where the magic happens. That's where the rubber meets the road. Dungeon Master has an awful lot to focus on. Any game master has a lot to focus on. The roughest job at the table, potentially the most rewarding. Um, and you've got to keep track of the rules of the game. Uh, Discard them when they get in the way of too much fun, but the rules are there for a reason, and following those rules as guidelines is, again, how people share their experience in that world. We are in a world with consistent rules that apply to all of us, and therefore we can all be in the same place, part of the experience. You can focus on your game world and how the overall plot is being affected by events. You're thinking of that next villain. You concentrating on, well, the whole time that this is going on, you're trying to get him funneled into the cave with the dragon in it, because that's the game, is the cave with the dragon in it. That's where you put all your time and effort, the cave with the dragon in it, and not getting him there fast enough. You got to keep your focus. You got to keep eyes on the prize. There's nothing wrong with having any of these as a focus, but keeping a primary focus on the rules, or primarily focusing on events you are trying to get to happen, takes away from that moment that everyone is in. Combat is a big part of most role playing games. Combat is mostly based in random chance and stacking your odds, and it's a lot of math. It's one of the more entertaining parts of the game if your character's optimized that way. Uh, but it might not be what everyone is there for. Is everyone going to remember combat favorably? Is this going to give us a moment where we all get to stand up and cheer? Is this going to be the tearjerker, laugh bringer? Is this going to give me the emotional content that makes this game live for everyone? You find that out in session zero. What are people expecting? What do people want in this game? You can ask those questions flat out in that session zero. What do you want from me as your game master? Um, I kind of knew in this campaign what was the from the person asking to the people involved, the kind of experience I was asked to give. I kind of knew what folks were expecting, and And I really love that kind of thing. It's storytelling, feels and emotions and comedy and tragedy and tension. But are they going to remember that time they rolled a 14? Or are they going to remember that time they managed to save the orphan from the burning building and one of them lost an arm doing it? They could easily remember both of them, but I know one of them is more memorable. Because you aren't just crafting something that is going to last now. You could record your games and go back and look at them, doing a lot of that these days. You could, um, you could, draw art from these, but you're crafting something when you are playing a role-playing game. You're crafting a story as a group. You're making something that is to be told and retold. You are creating this history, these tales of what these characters have accomplished. The story is called Little Red Riding Hood. It is not called The Deep Woods with the Wolf in it. You place the story in the deep woods with the wolf in it, but it's not about the deep woods nor really the wolf. Little Red Riding Hood is the protagonist. Arguably, I've read versions of the story where the wolf is the protagonist, but the stories are about the characters. You follow the characters. Everything else is backdrop. So, character based campaign is the core of the role playing game experience. In my opinion, I am well aware that there are other schools of thought regarding this. Let me put it this way: the character based campaign is core of my role playing game experience, or the experience you will have if you play a role playing game with me. Um, I want you to walk away from a game that I have run feeling like you have been the protagonist, like you've had the spotlight, like your character entered into a world that needed things done, and your character had a lasting and far reaching effect on that world. That you had an effect, that you made a difference, and for the most part, that difference was for the better. If that's what your character is into. I'm not gonna, if someone just wants to go in and break stuff, I want you to feel like you broke stuff better than anyone else. One reason I'm talking about character-based campaigns at this time. Uh, I'm going to throw in an extra plug today. I have been involved with a role-playing group that goes by the name The Layer Action. You can find information about this project at thelayeraction.com. We have been recording games and putting them through some sound editing and adding a little flair and releasing them via Podbean. If you go to layeraction.com, you will have a link to the Podbean page and our adventures there. We have recently started producing and publishing our adventures from a campaign called Days of Our Monks. I may have mentioned things about that in the channel. It is a character-based campaign. Uh, the conceit of the campaign was everyone plays a monk, and no one else in the group really had an idea of what to do with that. I started to run a pastiche of Enter the Dragon, and it went some places I have never seen a campaign go before. The second episode of that is going to premiere tomorrow. Tomorrow being August the 18th of 2020. First episode is up now. I would invite you to go and have a listen if you'd like to hear what one of my character-based campaigns is like. Fresh episodes every other Tuesday. I'm really excited about my work with the layer action and what we have managed to accomplish so far. It's been a learning process, but it's been an exquisite learning process. The layer action is a really, really good group. We have had a lot of good experiences in games, and enough that there are going to be podcasts for some years to come, even at this point. Well, thank you very much for following me along and listening to the plug. Really appreciate you hanging in with me. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't like the video, give me a thumbs down. Feedback is feedback. If you have anything else you'd like to hear me talk about, things you'd like to hear me cover, other subjects you'd like me to discuss, leave me a comment below. I will love getting your comment. You will love leaving me one. If you have not subscribed to my channel yet, why not? My channel is awesome. I invite you to hit the subscribe button. If you do, you might also want to hit the notification bell so that you're alerted when my videos become available. If you would like to contribute to the channel in a more substantial manner, I invite you to hit me up on my Patreon page, www.patreon.com/ScottCorum, and consider donating. Absolutely anything helps. Allows me to make better videos more often. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. I'm Scott Corum. This is what has mattered to me, and I will talk to you next time on the next Matters of DeCorum.